right, thank you for staying with Daybreak. We're having a conversation on the larger insecurity in the north and what are the lasting solutions, but also reading some of your tributes here to the fallen gallant soldiers of our nation. Let's bring that up first, and then I'll see your feedback in terms of what interventions need to be done to pacify the north side. Sakaja Atta Johnson, that is the governor for Nairobi, is saying, I extend my heartfelt condolences to the family of Chief of Defense Forces General Ogolla and the servicemen and women on board the ill-fated helicopter. On behalf of the county government of Nairobi and her people, our nation has lost a gallant general and a dedicated servant. My government worked closely with the general, a gentle, firm and steady hand. Go well, General. Okay, let's see what else he's saying here in terms of the tributes for the fallen soldiers. Dr. Alfred Mutua, who's the CS for tourism. I'm deeply saddened to learn of the untimely passing of General Francis Ogolla, the Chief of Kenya Defense Forces, alongside other distinguished military officers and patriots. Having had the privilege of meeting and working closely with General Ogolla for many years, and most recently in the lead-up to the Climate Change Summit held in Nairobi in September 2023, I'm profoundly struck by the loss. His remarkable character, distinguished military service, and exemplary leadership left an indelible mark on all who had the honor of knowing him. General Ogolla's unwavering commitment to duty, coupled with his steadfast dedication to the betterment of our nation, embodied the highest ideals of service and sacrifice. His legacy as a great man, a gallant military officer, and a visionary leader will endure in the annals of Kenya's history. Our nation mourns the loss of a true patriot and a towering figure. My heartfelt condolences go out to the family and friends of General Ogolla, as well as to the loved ones of the other passengers on board the helicopter. During this challenging time of sorrow, please know that you are all in our thoughts and prayers. Poleni sana. Okay, let's bring up another here. Kipchumba Murkomen, the CS for Roads and Transport. My deepest condolence to the families and friends of Chief of Defense Forces Francis Ogolla and his officers who died in a KDF helicopter crash yesterday. I also wish the two gallant soldiers who were injured in this tragic incident a quick recovery. In the course of duty, I came to know General Ogolla as a man of dignity and great wisdom. On many occasions, we had consultations, especially on matters of aviation. Just this February, he called on me in my office, and we had an extensive conversation on the development of our aviation sector and the good work our defense forces do to defend our borders. May the Lord comfort his family and those of his colleagues during this difficult time. Okay, let's bring up another one here. Honorable Edan Duale, CS for Defense, says, with profound sorrow, we share the passing of General Francis Ogolla, a decorated and distinguished Kenya Air Force officer who served our country for 40 years, culminating in his appointment as Chief of Defense Forces. As the Cabinet Secretary in the Ministry of Defense, I had the privilege of working closely with General Ogolla, both as the Vice and Chief of Defense Forces. He was to me a brother first, then a friend, a colleague, and lastly a general and a member of the Defense Council. His legacy will forever be cherished in our hearts and in our nation's history. Our thoughts and prayers are with his family and those of the other officers in the ill-fated flight. Professor Kithure Kindiki is there, says Kenya is much poorer without them, and their courage and patriotism will forever linger. Much sympathies to their families. I don't think that's his actual account, but there is still Kenyans giving their views and their tributes to the fallen soldiers. Let's see some of your feedback in terms of what's been going on there in terms of the North Rift region and what is this lasting solution to it. That's the conversation we're having. There's been several interventions, but it seems that still they haven't really worked to pacify the northern side. Let's see what you're saying in regards to that and see Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Daybreak. We'll come to your feedback in just a bit. But let me bring in again here Dr. Gidhua. This issue of social acceptance, whereby Musamali was saying that they look at the government and what they see is almost an oppressor rather than a friend. But then, where do you draw the line? Because if you withdraw the boots on the ground, then the situation becomes worse. If you push the boots on the ground, the people feel like they're being oppressed. Because you see, when you want to get that social acceptance, there has to be some level of trust from the people. Even when this cattle rustling is happening, hundreds and thousands of herds of cattle, they pass right in front of them. So they do know some of the people perpetrating these issues, but they are not willing to come forth. So how do you balance this? Create a social acceptance and maintain law and order?
Yeah, thanks for your question, Trevor. It's complicated. There's a direct path to it. It's also complicated. Like you're saying, what Musamali said, and our perception is that when these communities see soldiers and they see the government, they see an enemy. They see someone who is coming to extract from us using force. One way of gaining or changing that image and perception, in my view, is, for example, the KDF has very specialized units within it. And I think, for example, like when the Reverend mentioned the way the church has built schools, has built dug boreholes, and been out there extending all these services, the Kenyan military could also do that to just change the perception of the community about government and about soldiers in uniform. For example, I know the KDF has very many doctors and clinical officers within its ranks. Have free clinics in those areas. Call it KDF Day or whatever name they're going to call it, but go and man those clinics. Help those women deliver their kids, immunization campaigns. Let the soldiers be at the forefront without their guns now, but now showing, yes, we are in uniform, but we have humane hearts. That is one way of trying to change that perception about when you see soldiers, you can only expect trouble from them. That has got to be one way of doing it in terms of trying to make the community see the government as a friend, and specifically the soldiers, because the big issue with these communities is that they see soldiers and they see they're coming to pick our sons, they're coming to pick our daughters. We can only expect tears. The 1984 incident that Musamali talked about, the Ateker cluster, the Turkanas especially, talk about it with a lot of fear because of the amount of force that was used. For them, they saw helicopters during that time, and what they can just remember, in fact, if you remind them, they shake their heads about it. So erasing some of those memories, rolling back some of those negative ingrained memories from them will only take something positive and something good. So the soldiers going out, holding free medical camp clinics, some of these soldiers dedicating sometimes, when these bases are built, let them, some of them volunteer in CSR projects as teachers while in uniform. So the community will start to see soldiers as friends, enablers of development, as opposed to just coming to just clamp down. Then the other part I would want to say is that the government now needs to change tact with the political leadership of these areas. And this is it's unfortunate that in this century, in the year 2024, we still have political leaders from these areas who do not want their communities to be liberated from these retrogressive cultures and this commercialization, or being abused and used in this commercialization of cattle rustling. It is not once or twice that parliamentarians have brought bills on the floor of the House sanctioning, with serious sanctions for people who are caught to be enablers of cattle rustling and commercialization. But those bills do not sail through. Someone shoots them down. So the big question we want to ask ourselves is, here is government through the legislative wing trying to change and also bring sanctions or create a law that criminalizes people who are enabling these retrogressive practices. But when that bill is brought on the floor of the House, somehow it is shot down. I don't know whether money changes hands or vested interests pull strings and convince people not to vote for the bill. So I think it's high time now government uses a little bit of more force. I'd like to see a bit of more initiative from government in making sure that going forward, this price we have paid is too high. I mean, losing a sitting CDF is too high a price. Yeah. Let a bill be created in Parliament that criminalizes cattle rustling. Okay. If you're caught in banditry, there is a sanction. If you're a political leader and investigations prove that you have aided and abetted these practices, there should be serious sanctions. I think if we go down that route and we see 1 or 2, 3 prosecutions, it will not be a slap on the wrist. There'll be a clear message even to the political leadership that we cannot be part of this perpetuated problem in this region. So I think those two approaches would help, but more so, the social acceptance is just changing the image. Let them come not with guns, but let them come bearing gifts, medicine. We've come as teachers. These are soldiers in uniform. From the police force, the GSU, the army. And I think these communities will start realizing these soldiers are part of us.
Okay.
These soldiers are here to help us.
Yeah. And Reverend, walk me through this Northern Kenya mission. So how does it work exactly? Do you do this in churches? Do you do it in villages? How is it structured? Do you start with the clergy from that area? Are you talking to the village elders? How are your missions categorized and how do they work? How do they flow?
Now, thank you so much, Trevor. But just maybe before I get to answering that, one of the other things I would want to add with what Daktari has said is that a more sustainable or social action and advocacy strategy would be creating order. The first time I went up north, because it's a number of years when I began going up north, there were no roads. And one of the times we were using some trucks to go up there, we missed some assault narrowly because of the road. The trucks would spend days on the way. But now, since some of these spaces have good roads, the security has really improved. Like what Mr. Msamali said, that these people, some of these people are just very few pockets of individuals in spaces. But because there's no order, there are no roads, the spaces are not accessible, fishing them out of their hideouts is very difficult, then it becomes something that is enabled because there's no order. So that could be a very long-term strategy. But now, back to your question, we have systematic ways of approaching the communities. You go to spaces where there is, you identify the needs. And of course, you work with spaces that can be able to cascade the impact to other spaces. So you begin with settlements that have already formed, then you get to the community elders. There is no way you will get into those communities without working with the local leadership. So once you have these conversations, they will tell you what they need. Don't bring them some things that they are not interested in. Some people have been known to go and dig things like toilets, and yet those people are not interested in toilets. So they abandon the toilets. Their perceptions and their mindset towards this kind of intervention is yet to be formed. So the best way is to be able to understand what really they need, begin from that point. Because strategies of social action, then they bring the person to you. Because people are wondering, so what are you really bringing to us as opposed to what you're taking out from us? So when they know that you're there out there to serve them and to add value to their needs, their real needs, not what imagined needs, then they become your friends. From there, you can be able to bring on board greater intervention.
Yeah, the reason why I'm worried with that, Reverend, is because you seem like you're preaching to the choir. Because you've mentioned very well that the actual people are in places that are inaccessible.
Yes.
So you go to a village setup, you speak to the people already
the
there.
Manyatas, actually.
And they think, when you're speaking to them, they're thinking, well, I'm not the bandits. The bandits are in different places. So are you preaching to the wrong congregation?
Not at all. Remember, these are our young men.
Yeah.
They come from these spaces. They are not some people from space, from Uganda or another place, Trevor. They are young men who come from these communities. So the best way to get to them is not starting at the bush, is starting from the spaces that are known. Then from this local level, then we can be able to get to their sons.
Yeah. So you hope they cascade the message to those who are even
it
in
has
the
actually worked
in different places.
in some spaces, because that is where we've seen some. It may look like it's very slow, but gradually there's some fruits.
There's some progress.
Yes.
Okay. Well, Indilai, you know, we're talking about building trust between servicemen and the community. But you've been a serviceman yourself. How easy is that at a moment where you're in a strange place, you're not even sure who you're interacting with, whether this is actually a bandit or a friend or an enemy, but we expect you to be cordial with them and build trust? How difficult is it? Because, you know, it's easy for us to speak about this when we're in places like here, but when you're actually on the ground, how easy is it to build that trust with the community that you don't know who you're speaking to?
Actually, quite easy, Trevor, on that note. And it's been 1 year now since this Kenya Kwanza administration deployed this multi-agency approach, especially in that area, under the Operation Maliza Uhalifu. Perhaps we should note that part of what KDF and the good general was doing, the schools he was inspecting are actually being rebuilt and others being started from scratch by the KDF itself. I'm happy my fellow panelists have mentioned that approach, because I don't have the latest information, but they have done pretty much what he has mentioned. There was a free health clinic. I don't think they have pulled out. They're still continuing. These officers also, when schools are open, they give escorts and even transport to school-going children. One of the fallen gallant soldiers is Brigadier Said, who is a designated combat engineer. So that clearly tells you what his role was in that mission. He's the one who was briefing the CDF on the progress KDF and the government has made insofar as building those schools, opening up those roads, and even in farming. I have information that KDF even dedicated its resources in terms of equipment, in terms of tractors to cultivate land, in the introduction of farming to some of those communities. So it's only been 1 year. It is progressive, and all that has been deployed, including involving the community volunteers, who also provide intelligence, raw intelligence in terms of who is involved in this banditry and livestock rustling. So in my view, what needs to be done now is the conviction of most of the suspects who are arrested during operations, for example. And such convictions also need to be made public. We should not see politicians of whatever rank hiding behind some support within the community. I mean, the only way somebody can see accountability is when a leader, whether he's an MP or an MCA or whatever level, is investigated, found to be culpable, and is convicted through the entire process of the law. I know there is some bottlenecks when you mention the law in our land. I mean, people find loopholes either within the courts or in other areas, but we need now to see the conviction. But such an approach by the military has endeared itself to the locals. When you see a military officer is the one who is immunizing children, is the one who is escorting children to school, is the one who is rebuilding the school, because they're not just engineers, but their own personnel are the ones who are undertaking these processes on the ground. So they have endeared themselves. They have also dug boreholes. They have also done dams in those areas. So they have really tried. For a 1 year approach, it is progressive, and they have done quite a lot.
Okay.
Thank you.
Musamali, you've also been there and as a serviceman, and what Olendila is saying is true, that there's actually been some military intervention there, the building schools, also having the medical camps. That is true. But how do you build trust going forward? Because this is a time when, as a serviceman, in your own experience, when you're there on the ground, what runs through your mind? Because you see, there's a difference between what people like us here might dictate and people who are actually on the ground, seeing it in real time.
It's true, Trevor, that you need to build trust. And basically what has been happening before is we've always gone there, put up camps, and alienated ourselves from the community.
That is how you've operated?
That is initially, that's how we used to operate.
Yeah.
Once you're deployed to such a place, you get there and you're told everybody here is a bandit. You don't trust anybody.
Yeah.
But you will find that these bandits are a very small pocket amongst the larger community. And when you start treating everybody as a bandit, everybody else will believe that I am a bandit. And that is where the problem is. They will look at these bandits as benefactors as opposed to be criminals. So we must find a way of telling the community, we are here to help you, we are here to support you. And if there's a bad element within the society, we need to remove this particular person, not every other person. I operated in a place called Kibish. We went to Kibish. Kibish was volatile. We had the Taposas in Sudan, we had the Dongiro, and then we had the Karamojong in Uganda. And then we had our own Turkanas. So how did we succeed? we endeared ourselves to the Turkanas. We shared water. We had a water booster. It will bring water. We'll call in the community. We are here. Hey, come, get water. Any small food that we had, we shared with the community. And slowly by slowly, we won the hearts and minds of those people. And they started giving us raw intel on who amongst them was involved in banditry, who was working with the Karamojong in Uganda, who was working with the Taposas in Sudan. And we infiltrated this circle. And slowly by slowly, right now, if you ask anybody about Kibish, nobody knows Kibish exists. But in the 90s, it was hot. You get deployed there, you don't even know if you'll ever get back to your family. And I'll also like to give an example of Mount Elgon, where I come from. When the KDF was deployed there to deal with the Matakwei menace, the first thing they did was engage the community. Brought the people on board, came up with clinics, medical clinics, because there were a lot of atrocities that were being committed by the Sabot Land Defense Forces. And in this way, they were able to penetrate that circle. So the people felt like now Matakwei, as much as he's talking about land, he became the enemy of the people. And that approach worked. So what we are seeing right now by the multi-agency approach is that we are trying to win the hearts of the people, endearing ourselves to the people. In a place, if you go to my place, when they see a chief, they will see a chief during a funeral. And when the chief comes there, he will come and say, "Mutakunywa changa hapa mtawamaliza." You know, he's not coming in with a friendly approach telling us, "Hey, but guys, this is what the government is doing." And the main problem we are having here is illegal brew. But you come and threaten the community will be like, we kwenda huko. So we should have a face, a friendly face, put a friendly face on the multi-agency team. Yeah? As Daktari mentioned here, you go to areas of Kachiliba, you go to areas of Endebes, Kwanza, Swami, you talk of Operation Nyundo, people would rather cross the border and go to Uganda. If it's the same thing that is going to happen again, we would rather get out or fight to survive.
Yeah.
That is a perception that now we need to change.
Yeah.
Let us approach these people in a friendly way, as what the general was doing, telling these people, you people can take your children to school safely, and they'll get back home safely.
Yeah.
And if you look at what is happening from a security angle, you realize right now we are not seeing any contact between the bandits and the security agencies. We've not seen any fighting between the two. Why? Even the bandits have realized there's something that has changed. They are holding back. And we are seeing even the military and the police are not so much interested in what the bandits are doing. They are concentrating on the larger community. And this is exactly what we are talking about here.
Yeah.
That change of tact. Initially, we used to go there, let's go fight, 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 take boots, show these people we have power. You are bringing in anti-personnel carriers. But now we are saying we are bringing the pen. Yeah? We are bringing the chalk.
Yeah.
We are bringing medicine for you people. Because if you let that bandit be the overseer of everything, stealing this cattle, commercializing it, selling the cattle, at the end of the day, this is the person that will come home with milk. Who is your benefactor? Definitely, you will tend to trust this person more than the government. So the government needs to re-engineer and win the minds of those people.
Yeah.
Show them you are in independent Kenya.
Okay.
And you have all the rights of another Kenyan who is living in Nakuru, Nairobi, wherever. We are endeavoring to promote you.
Yeah.
But we need to deal with it head on, especially political instigated banditry. And as I've said, we've not seen punishment.
Yeah.
We've not seen sanctions. People are being mentioned. At the end of the day, we had people being summoned in Nakuru the other day.
Yeah.
A whole list of politicians were being told, we have been told to report to the DCI. And they came on television saying, we are being summoned, we are being persecuted. But in reality, if these are the people and we have information, why can't we remove politics from the whole game and have people take responsibility for their actions?
Okay.
Because as Dr. said, this is a big price we've paid. And it's not the first one.
Yeah.
Remember I mentioned about Chelanga.
Yeah.
His helicopter went down exactly in the same area.
Okay.
And up to now, we've not seen people being arrested and arraigned in court and being punished for this.
Yeah.
Including even the bandits themselves. How many bandits have we arrested?
There are no figures to it, but there's been some arrests.
Yes,
several arrests.
But we can talk about officers that have lost their lives in line of duty in those areas.
Okay.
A whole list of people. But now we need to change all this.
But even as we're changing all that, there's a pronouncement by the CS for Defense that said that we need to increase the presence there. In fact, he said that we will probably even use the military, if that is what it takes, because it seems the easy way has not worked. Would that be an option?
Trevor, this is not the first time we're using the military.
Yeah.
Operation Nyundo was a military operation. The British in 1908 used the military. Yeah? So this has not been the first time we've had military intervention. Even after Operation Nyundo, we still had other small operations in those areas, but they did not succeed. That is why I said, yeah? Two powers, the sword and the mind. The mind will always beat the sword. So let us now concentrate on the mind. Let's forget about the sword. We cannot say we remove the sword completely. 30% the boots will work. 70% is winning the hearts and minds of the people. And when the president talked about religious evangelism, people did not see where he was coming from. But I think he realized that if you go to Kachiliba, where I've been, if you go to Takwel, if they see a Catholic priest, they will sit and listen. Because this is a person who has been with this community for the longest. They have seen what the church can do, build schools. They have seen what the church can do, build hospitals.
Yeah.
So even that intervention is very important, because now we are working on the social, economic fabric of the community. Okay. And this is exactly what we need. Okay.
I want to come to your feedback in just a bit and see what you're saying. And Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya used the hashtag Daybreak. But before we come into that, in fact, we'll talk about that in just a bit. But Dr. Gidhua, going forward, where is the space for local conflict resolution? Because we're talking about interventions. But should they be left to their devices, so to speak, so that they handle it in their own way, community to community? Because we are talking about removing the politicians out of it, but the truth is they are there. These are the elected leaders.
Yeah, thanks for your question, Trevor. There's always space for local community peace reconciliation. In fact, that should be the foundation, the backbone per se. I saw some time ago in the news the CS, Professor Kindiki, going and saying he'd gone to spearhead some of those, trying to reconcile the communities. But the tact, in my view, when it is that high level, there are people who will not feel free to come. I would rather the approach whereby they are the church-led. For me, I would advocate more for the church-led approach, where, like what Msamali is saying, let that Catholic priest who is loved by all sides come and say, I want to meet the elders. Talk to these elders from the Turkana side, talk to the elders from the Pokot side, talk to the elders from the Marakwet side, or whichever other side. And then from that basis, start talking to them. And the religious angle for me, I resonate a lot with the religious angle because, even as he's telling them to reconcile, using scriptures of the Bible like love your neighbor, take care of yourself, it will be like he's evangelizing, but at the same time telling them, why can't we live in peace? What are the problems that you need help in? And once he has started this conversation at the local level, then it can build into something bigger. Trevor, by the way, it does not mean that these communities, all their years of their existence, do not have their own internal homegrown solutions to their problems. Sometimes when this cattle rustling had reached a certain level, among themselves, the elders would sit among themselves and say, hey, our young men have gone a bit too far. We are only supposed to go and steal the cattle. Now they have killed people. They have, maimed children. They have hurt women. They have their own internal mechanisms of solving these disputes. So what we probably just need to do is create an enabling environment for them. For me, I'd advocate the church-led approach because that is what is trusted right now. Government so far is seen as, quote unquote, the enemy. They will only come here and give us a top-down approach. Let's try a bottom-up approach. NGOs, there are so many NGOs that are operating in these spaces. Enable them, facilitate them to have this civic education. Call them for camps, call them for these sessions where we can teach them about just peace within the community, alternative livelihood, mechanisms, and peace can be built. I think peace should be built from the bottom up. The boots on the ground, we still need the presence of boots on the ground just to take care of the bandits who will come to disrupt these peace-building processes, but have a bottom-up approach. Let NGOs go in, be facilitated, let NGOs go in, let the church step up and be facilitated to do this. Then, trust me, quietly, things are going to change. The problem of having these big government officials coming in and really broadcasting, we have gone there for a peace mission, the people who really need to talk about the issues affecting them will not come for those meetings. They will feel, I am too exposed. But when it is the Catholic priest, when it is CITAM doing it, when it's the reverends doing it, people who have walked with them, who have sweated with them, people who have gone through the hardships with them, telling them, how about peace? How can't we solve our problems differently? They will listen.
Yeah.
So a bottom-up approach, and trust me, these communities are gradually going to change their perception about this whole commercialization of cattle rustling.
Okay. Reverend, earlier on you had mentioned targeting the younger generation.
Yes.
How would you do this? Is this going to be done through education or through preaching or through barazas? Because the children don't come to the barazas anyway. How would you do it? And how has it been done from what you've seen?
When the president talked about evangelism and discipleship, as a strategy, as a long-term strategy, I believe it's because it has borne fruit. That is one of the strategies, teaching the people the scriptures, like Daktari says, those values, the values of love one another, the values of human life really matters. But also one of the greatest strategies, which is a social action intervention that has been embraced worldwide, and organizations like Compassion International, World Vision have employed that: education. The young people, if you look at a crop of children like we picked in one of our stations in up north, and they have been with us in a program, education, for like the last 5 years, you see their lives have been transformed. They don't think like the children that are still in the manyatas. And also when they come to the family level, they bring a lot of transformation because their families get to benefit. And I really would want us to demystify this word bandits, because they are just human beings, our very own people. If we start seeing them as part of our families, they come from our families, as opposed to that big amorphous word, then we start treating them like human beings. And maybe we may be able to employ more human strategies to get them back to the society and rehabilitate them.
Okay.
Yep.
Olindilai, as a serviceman yourself, has disarmament worked? Then how are people disarmed? Because there's always been that call that first we're giving you a 10-day period, bring all your guns. But there's also been allegations that they bring the guns that are dysfunctional, but the real machines are kept at home just so that they tick the box. How does it work?
Thank you, Trevor. Again, on that one, that is why you need the community approach. Because first of all, for you to get the raw intelligence, the real information as to who participates, who finances, who arms, then you need information from the community itself. Demobilizing and reintegrating ex-bandits into the community is also another process. And it is conducted by NGOs, it is conducted by the church, and it is also conducted by the government, because you need to bring them back so that they can feel pardoned, you know, and also to educate now the younger ones on the ills, the negatives of being involved in livestock rustling. I'm happy Daktari has mentioned, because this is another approach that this one-year-old approach is deploying. There is, I think, weekly village visits that are conducted by these officers, and they are being facilitated by the elders. The elders being the bridge between now the government and the younger generation and the community in general. And it is, so to speak, it is building the trust. Slowly the community is finding uniformed officers, whether police or KDF, approachable. Now, in terms of surrendering or disarming these individuals, it's quite tricky because first you need the intelligence to know who has what kind of weapons, where do they hide them, when do they use them. It's a slow but progressive effort that is being made in that front as well. We've seen very many young people surrendering. We have seen recoveries even of stolen livestock being made. We've seen now school resuming in most of those areas. And all that is as a result of certain people being disarmed, wrong guns being in the wrong hands. And it is a long-term approach, but it will eventually work. So disarming and reintegrating some of these individuals into the community is a slowly, because for them to shift, as somebody said, mind first, for them to shift from that thinking to the new thinking, then you need to, it's long-term. It doesn't just change from one moment. Yeah.
Okay. Musamali, what do you think about disarmament? Because it's not necessarily a peaceful process. We've seen time frames being given for them to hand in their guns, and then the military now come for what they believe are the rest of the guns there. Doesn't that cause a much bigger rift in the process? Because that is also the time where you start hearing of human rights abuses.
I think we've tried disarmament before, and it has not worked. The reason why it has not worked is because of the wearing communities, mistrust amongst the wearing communities. For example, you'll find the Pokots will say, we disarm, they're only disarming the Pokots, they're not disarming the Turkanas. The Marakwet will say they are only disarming the Marakwet, they're not disarming the Pokots. So that is where the problem lies. And these people will say, we don't see government coming in and providing security. So the first thing that must improve is provision of security by the government. So people will not see the need of having the guns. So the guns will remain in the few hands of the people, the so-called bandits, and we can deal with that. But right now, the larger community is looking at these people we call bandits as their security, as their protection. And remember, when Major General Ali became the Commissioner of Police, the first thing he did was to do away with these people we call Kenya Police Reservists. Because you are arming one part of the community, the other community says we also need to have our own reservists. You get? It brought a major, major, major problem amongst these communities. So if we want to disarm, first, we must show the people that, yes, we are here and we are providing security. If what is happening right now, for example, is we are having a multi-agency approach, we are having security operations in the area, and still these bandits are causing havoc. Schools are being closed. It clearly points to the government failure in providing security to those communities. And this community will feel like, okay, if the army is here and our people are still being killed, what will stop them from crossing the border, getting firearms to protect themselves? So provision of security by the government is the first step towards eradicating the proliferation of small arms from neighboring countries. Remember, this area borders Uganda, it borders South Sudan, it borders Ethiopia. And these countries have their own internal security problems. So it's easy, very easy, for these firearms to cross the border and get into the wrong hands in Kenya. So we must first up our game in provision of security to the community. The presence of the police should be there. Punishment should be there, as we've said. If with no punishment, these bandits will still operate with impunity. And the community will not want to talk about them because they are embedded in the same community. So we need intelligence-based policing, infiltrating this community. And that can only be done when we have what we call a local network that works with a multi-agency team. And as we have all said, we must involve the community elders, community leaders, not politicians per se. Because at some point, you will find that these politicians are so detached from the community. The moment they get their votes, they come to Nairobi. They will only go back to the village if there's a funeral. The next day he's not there. So they don't understand how the community operates. But we have those local community elders who, if we marshal together from different communities, and then, as we've said, bring in people that are trusted by the community, the church, then you will find people will start talking. As I gave an example of Kibish, where we integrated so well with the community, we started getting actionable intelligence on who is working with who across the border to steal cattle from Kenya, take to Uganda, steal cattle from Uganda, bring to Kenya.
Yeah.
And from that approach, we were able to eradicate that problem. From that approach, the people surrendered their firearms because we said, we are here not to fight you, but to protect you. So if you feel like you want to remain with that firearm, then we'll deal you as a criminal, not as a member, a part of this community.
Yeah.
So I think when we talk about disarmament, we should talk about now enhancing security for the good people so that we isolate them from the bad. But if we cannot protect the good, then the good will go for the alternative. And the alternative is unpalatable. Okay. They will go for the bandits because they will feel like these are part of us, and in case we are attacked, then our young boys will protect us.
Okay.
That has always been the perception in those areas.
Yeah.
And if we want disarmament to succeed, then government should be seen, improve in provision of security, and be acceptable by all the community living along the common borders. Okay,
Dr. Gidua, it seems we are all having a conversation about a balance here, about force to use and how much diplomacy to use. And something interesting, Olendilai brought up an issue of reintegration. So how do you do reintegration and couple it with punishment at the same time? Because there's always that perception that if someone is a reformed bandit, first of all, how do you even know they're reformed? Second, they had committed some atrocities before. So where's the measure of punishment that comes with it? But then also, if you just punish them without allowing them back into the community, then you're still seen as a bad person. So how do you balance this, integration and punishment?
Yeah, thank you. That's the elephant in post-conflict reconstruction. Ideally, the DDR program, disarmament, demobilization, reintegration, is usually one of the trickiest aspects because unlike in a civil war, for example, assuming Sudan stops fighting and then RSF and the ASAF, reintegration will be much easier at that level because these are professional soldiers at a different level. But now when you're dealing with a community and the reintegration program of, let's say, the bandits or these cattle rustlers is going to be much more trickier. Number one, in the reintegration, you need to counsel the community to accept some of these people back. Because one of the challenges of reintegration is that the bandits want to be reformed. They have even given up the gun. But when you take them through counseling and you take them aside, the community is not ready to accept them because of the atrocities they had committed. The community is still not ready to forgive them, quote unquote, for what they had done. The people they maimed, the women they sexually abused, whose cattle they stole. So the reintegration aspect is very tricky. The government needs to do more on the community, even more than the bandits themselves, in my view. Because if this reformed bandit comes back to the community and he gets rejected by the very people from who he never went to school, probably dropped out, was recruited at 12, 13 years. We've seen videos of some of these bandits are that young. They get into that when they're this young. When this boy comes back and he's 20 plus, he's been doing this for 10 years, and he finds his parents, his relatives do not want anything to do with him because he went to disgrace the name of the family, they resort back to the only thing they know how, back to that group that gave them acceptance. And that is the same thing that happens in radicalization also. So reintegration is a much deeper aspect. We're talking about psychosocial support, not only for the reformed bandits, but also for the community. Are you ready to have these young men come back and be part of you and probably pursue alternative livelihoods? That is a tall order. I'm not saying it is impossible, but that is now where the rubber meets the road, that reintegration process. Of course, it is a balancing act because also they need to sometimes be accountable, be held accountable for what they did. But that's now why in post-conflict reconstruction we talk about at some point you bite the bullet and give an amnesty and you forgive them, a blanket amnesty for the sake of peace. Because now if we end up punishing everyone who committed all these crimes, we'll end up also building resentment within the same communities we are trying to address issues of. So at some point the government also needs to reconsider the ones who genuinely turn to be state witnesses and to become, let's say, facilitators of state and giving intelligence. We forgive them and allow them to come back into the community. But again, the flip side of that coin is the ones who are still remaining in the bush, knowing that you have become a snitch or you've become a sellout could come for you. So it's a very delicate balancing act. Yeah. At the outset, boots on the ground to create peace. The ones who want to give up their weapons, let them give up their weapons. Take them through a program for psychosocial support, reintegrate them into the community, and slowly try and win the ones you can. The ones you cannot, like Musamali said, and like all the other panelists are saying, deal with them with the full force of the law, because now they have really shown you they are not for peace. So you can't really have them. And then lastly, Trevor, as I mentioned about, still on this aspect, you disarm with this arm, then the politicians rearm the same communities. That is what happens in disarmament. That is the puzzle. Blanket amnesty, people give out those guns, whether old or not, people give out the guns. Immediately, 2 months down the road, the politicians and the leaders in this community facilitate, and these people get new weapons. So we also need to cut off that arm. Otherwise, we will be in this perpetual cycle and having this conversation. So the intelligence services in the country, if they are aware or if they know, I've watched some documentaries where some people were saying that once a disarmament exercise takes place, drums of water, food aid, guns are hidden there. It's the same politicians rearming the same communities. So there we go. We are in this cycle once again. So how can we disarm and make sure that these communities do not get these arms again? We also need to deal with the people who are facilitating the rearming of the community.
Let me bring up some of your feedback as then I'll take closing remarks and recommendations from my panelists here as we wind up on this conversation on the insecurity in the North. We're trying to see how to create a balance between the use of force and the use of diplomacy at the same time. Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya used the hashtag Daybreak. Let's bring that up on screen and show you what you're saying. And now, perennial, as you see here, Engineer Lazaro says perennial cases of insecurity in the North Rift is of purely neglect from the successive governments. Otherwise, series of military chopper crash needs to be opened to international investigators in order to read out speculations of foul play. Bob Otieno Wino says insecurity in the North Rift is mainly contributed by political class and backs the starts and stops with them in order to end this menace before it gets out of hand and generates like fighting against terrorists. Tim says on insecurity in the North, we got it wrong in the first place. Who told Africans that their culture is evil and must be fought hard by themselves? Use diplomatic means to restore order. Billions should be shifted to infrastructure. Gabi Wakasiaka says, a legend has fallen. RIP General Francis Ogolla, we loved you and admired your leadership. God knew you were reassuring, and that is why he has called you up there in heaven to watch your back from above. The curtains of heaven are gray. Go well. Kate says it is sad that the general and his officers died while on a most crucial presidential assignment. We need to hit the ground and engage communities in the North to open up the region to the world. Brian says it sounds like the situation in the North Rift is complex with various factors contributing to the issue of banditry. The intertwining of cultural, political, and economic factors makes it challenging to address effectively. Rest in peace, General Ogolla. Godi Baraza says, with the death of General Ogolla as a country, we have paid a huge price for banditry and any form of criminal gangs to be obliterated in all war-torn areas. All leaders who happen to be sympathizers of these gangs must face the cruelty of the law. Leonard says demise of General Ogolla, Francis, and the rest left us in deep shock. This reminds us that it's not CSS for transport under Murkomen who would reduce accidents by 50%, as the President Ruto said, lest he's be in trouble, but only God. The President should lead the country into national repentance. Sawes is promoting development and integration in the North by involving the community and offering them a sense of belonging can solve most of the issues through a friendly approach. Using force may only lead to resistance. Honorable Lilian Sioi says, I convey my deepest condolences to the family of General Ogolla and KDF for having lost their gallant stewards in the line of duty. Kenya has indeed lost a fine soul who dedicated his life to diligently serving and protecting the country. My sincere condolence, heartfelt condolence to the family, friends, and relatives of the gallant soldiers who passed on a tragic chopper crash. Losing a whole general is such a monumental loss. May God comfort the families who lost their loved ones and the KDF families. Boville says we need to first ensure that no guns reaching the areas. Let's ask ourselves who is supplying the bandits with guns. Then let's ensure that the area is developed with KDF engaging in development projects. Then we shall win this war. Sam Masika says government of Kenya has been lenient to the terrorists and bandits in the north. This is a very expensive affair for us than even Haiti. These enemies of progress should be treated to their own means or meds. Is the state benefiting from the cattle rustling, or who is it? Okay. And I'll start with you, Reverend. Closing remarks on this. What do you recommend going forward as we close? Just 1 minute.
I would thank you, Trevor. Yeah. The only way to win this war is to understand that the national government cannot do it alone. We need the local government, the county government, the local leadership. We need other bodies like the church. We need the NGOs. We need everyone to be involved. But my biggest win would be to see the local leadership of these areas really transformed from their minds, because I somehow feel that if this happens, then there will be a proper solution on the ground moving forward.
All right. Olindilai, closing remarks.
Thank you, Trevor. It has been 1 year again since this multi-agency approach began. We have seen remarkable progress in it, but there's still a lot to be done. And I'm happy to note that on the part of the government, there is every single approach that is being deployed, involving the community, involving the elders, involving the youth, in endearing and building trusts amongst between the community and the practitioners of security, and even in the peace initiatives that have been begun by the church in conjunction with the elders, and also building peace and harmony within the communities that are in these areas at the same time. What I would like to see, maybe going forward, as young as this government policy is the conviction of some of the perpetrators of this heinous crime. Whether they are benefiting commercially, we have heard of the commercial angle, whether they are the facilitators in terms of those who are being used to execute these processes. Everybody, all Kenyans, need to see accountability in the part of the government in terms of conviction. Yeah. Can we find a way in which nobody can escape the pangs of justice, whether it is in the court? Yeah. We've seen people running to court sometimes to evade justice in getting anticipatory orders and all these other processes that are being used to frustrate the hand of justice. So conviction needs to be done, and convictions need to be seen to be done. We, as Kenyans now, this is a very sad moment for us, but this is also a moment for us to dust up and move on. Security is an enabler of our economy. We need to see security in every part of Kenya, not just in the Rift. Yeah. We are forgetting the northern frontier and every other part of the Republic of Kenya. Okay. So let us give time to government as well to deploy every logistical and tactical decision-making that they are doing at the moment to sort out the security issue.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Mali, 1 minute.
The death of General Ogolla and the other soldiers that passed on with him and others that died trying to pacify North Rift should not be in vain. And I think this now should re-energize us as Kenyans to find a lasting solution for the security problem in North Rift. And as we look at it, most of Kenyans look at North Rift as gangland. That perception should change. Those are Kenyans like us, and we should all engage, come up and support the government in trying to find a lasting solution to the insecurity in North Rift. It has cost us too much. And this is something that we should not play with. It's a fire that is burning. And if we let it be bigger, then automatically it will be very difficult for us to contain it. Let us borrow examples from other countries that have dealt with this problem and succeeded, And another thing that I would think, we should now find a way of moving these people from that area, because when we've localized the communities, for example, you will find a child in Pokot who has never been to Mombasa. He doesn't know how people in Mombasa live.
Yeah.
We can have an exchange program so that we remove these people, they go to other areas, they see how people coexist, and when they go back, I think they'll ape the same to their communities.
Okay.
So we as a people need to support the government in fighting insecurity and banditry in the North Rift area.
Okay. Dr.
Thank you.
Finally.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with all what my panelists have said, that community-led approach in solving this problem. I'll also just add that the government now needs to be decisive, needs to be strong, and strong in the sense that, like in The Prince, Machiavelli says, the lion under the fox. Sometimes it's good to be the fox, sometimes it's good to be the lion. I'd like to see the lion coming out this time around. Government being strong, especially on these politicians who instigate this banditry. People who through these commercializations, the beneficiaries should now be tracked down, and if these avenues can be shut down, we will move in the right direction in trying to reduce the incidences of banditry.
All right.
Gut rustling. Yeah.
Thank you so much for making time this morning. Melita Olindilai, security analyst and diplomat and former soldier. Dr. Edgar Githua, diplomacy and security analyst from Strathmore University. Reverend Purity Murugi, CITAM, and George Musamali, former GSU also and security analyst. Thank you so much for speaking to us this morning. And thank you all for the feedback that you've sent through. The country is still in mourning for the next 3 days after having lost our gallant soldiers. Coming up next now is Level Up Friday with Ben Roy T-Boy and Wana Vokali. Don't go too far.